Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we are talking about taking a break from regular life, from a career you don't love, and to discover what you're really meant to do. Here to talk about her journey is Xan Stofko and how a year sabbatical led her to become focused on the importance of joy in our lives. Hi, Xan. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Richard. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show, mostly because we've never really talked to someone who's had such a profound impact about taking a year off from, I call it regular life, but from the life they were living. So I'm excited to get and learn more about how this time away led to this transformation. But before we get there, can you talk a little bit about, growing up and finding a career and where you were before you took this break?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. But I think the way that I would sum up my childhood is by saying that I was trying to find myself in the expectations of everyone else. So I have this pattern of starting something, liking it because I thought I had to like it, deciding it wasn't for me, and then jumping ship and doing something else. I did this with piano. I played piano from second grade, and I went to high school at a performing arts for piano, decided right before going to college that I didn't want to do piano. I did gymnastics from the age of 3 to the age of 18, decided right before college that I didn't want to do gymnastics in college and jumped ship. When I went to college, I went for biology, and I thought, wow, everybody says I would be good as a doctor, so why don't I try to be a doctor? So I went through college, got my 4.0, applied to medical school, got into medical school, then decided right before going to medical school that I didn't want to go to medical school. So it was a journey of really just wondering, is something wrong with me? Like, why can't I find anything that sticks? Who am I? Getting lost in this question of purpose and identity and trying to find it in all the wrong places. And then fast forward to after college, I had a rock bottom moment. I fell into an abusive relationship with a man for 2 years, got addicted to methamphetamine, and just spiraled downwards. And I think that that was the collapse and the crumble of this idea that I had to be the perfect child. I had to do everything right to be worthy of love. And when I finally clawed my way out of that, I'm so proud of myself. I got out of that on my own. When I finally got out of it, I decided, okay, it's time to be an adult. It's time to get the job, to build up the ladder, to get the house, do all the things I'm supposed to do. And so that's when I started looking for a career, and I fell into insurance, which if you talk to anybody in insurance, they say they just kind of happened to end up there. So I started working in insurance consulting. I started as an assistant with a firm here in Dallas, worked my way up the ladder for, I think, 8 years. And that's how I got to the point where eventually I was working as an insurance consultant. And let me take a pause there.
Um, you know, what a life. And then one thing I was just struck by is kind of how much, almost self-confidence you had to realize these things, going into high school, going into university, going into med school, being in a terrible space in your life with your relationship and addiction. Is that part of your personality, just to like, I'm going to take charge of this and kind of change my life? Because I think a lot of people, they don't have that. But then on the contrast, then you just got into insurance and you kind of stayed there. Like it seems like there's almost two different people. How were you able to do that? And then what happened with your life in insurance?
Oh, wow. I think you just do what you do. I think that there were two people inside of me. There was the person that I thought I had to be, and then the person that I knew that I was, who I was always too afraid to truly listen to. But that person was there. She was underneath me, driving me, motivating me, and telling me once I got to that point where things weren't fully aligned, where I was about to commit to something that was going to take me down a path that didn't feel right. That's when she stepped in and said, no, this isn't for you. So I had the one part of me that was just head to the ground, do what you have to do, follow the rules. And then the other part of me that always steered me, always course corrected right before I got to that point where I was too far in and couldn't get myself out. So this is exactly what happened also with my health insurance career. I got up the ladder. I'm doing great. I'm making six figures. And I'm noticing that there's this part of me that's like, wait a second, am I supposed to do this until I retire? Something feels right. Something feels not right. Something's missing. Like, what's going on here? And that's that point where I was like, wait, maybe I need to explore something different. And when that happened, when that thought was planted, COVID happened. And I think that everything kind of bloomed during that year where we were shut down. And I had a chance to reevaluate my life and think about what I was doing, take pause for a true moment.
All the tragedy of the pandemic, but there were some good things that came out for some people who are able to like really understand themselves. And so in your case, what was the result from, this self-reflection?
Well, in 2020, I wasn't traveling. I wasn't flying somewhere different every week for work. I wasn't doing meetings. I wasn't going into the office for 60, 70 hours a week. I was home and I couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't doing anything with my friends. So I started getting outside and I started slowing down. And I started realizing that the only thing that had been keeping me from figuring out who I was my lack of ability to slow down and journey inward, to be present and reflect and connect with the world that was all around me. So that was the catalyst. I think I spent more time barefoot outside in 2020 than I did in the culmination of my life leading up to that point. So just developing this deep love for where I was, even amidst the chaos and even amidst the loss and the grief, that is what kept me grounded. And I came out the other side of that experience realizing that I was the one keeping myself from me.
Wow. And that led you to take a year-long sabbatical, where you went down to New Zealand. How did you decide to take a year off? What was that challenge like to make that decision?
Yeah. So I actually made that decision in 2019. I took my first solo trip. I went to Spain in 2018 for 10 days. While in Spain, I met someone who mentioned, oh, you're American. Did you know that you could go to New Zealand on a working holiday visa as long as you're under 30? And I was like, oh, okay, I got 1 year to apply for this visa. So I came back and I applied in 2019 with the intention of going in 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened. And during that time, I had no idea if I was going to get to actually go to New Zealand. My visa expired. I aged out of eligibility. I kind of put it out of my mind. And then in 2022, shortly after I ended my 7.5 year relationship with a man I thought I was going to marry, I made a really difficult decision to do that. And then I checked my email 2 days after that decision. And I had an email from New Zealand immigration saying, hey, we're going to honor your visa. You just have to be in the country by September of this year. So that was an easy decision because I had just blown up my life essentially. And I was like, okay, what else can I do to really reclaim like the life that I crave?
And so you went down to New Zealand on the working holiday maker visa. And did you have like a plan for what you want to accomplish when you were there, or were you just kind of going and saying, "I'm going to let life take its course and figure it out while I'm down there"?
I really didn't have a plan. I knew that I wanted to live in a van because that was something I had wanted to do for the last decade leading up to that point. So that was my starting point. I knew I was going to begin in Auckland, buy a van, and I wanted to see as much of the country as I possibly could. But that was the framework. And then from there, it was kind of just learning to flow in this really beautiful way that I hadn't given myself the opportunity to do before because I was so focused on control, so focused on having a set plan that I didn't do that. I didn't trust myself enough to do that. But when I was in New Zealand, I felt like a different person, which I really think is to say that I felt like more of me than I ever have before because I was finally honoring the call of my soul that was pulling me down this non-traditional path.
One thing I think a lot of people realize when they go on these longer journeys. You can't typically can't find this out in a week or 2 week or a 3 week vacation. But when you go for a longer journey, there's something unique that it kind of really changes them. In your case, you had the same thing. What is it about having this long time in a different country that you think really allowed you to kind of discover who you were, discover what's important to you?
I think it was having the slow pace. When you go somewhere for 10 days, 2 weeks, it's like, okay, we got to do everything we can possibly do. Can't miss anything because then this trip has been wasted, right? That was the mentality I had at least. And so it was nonstop go. Whereas with this year, I really came to realize it's not about creating a list of things you want to see, museums you want to visit. It's about getting to a new place and really allowing yourself to arrive. Like the first day when I got anywhere, it was just wandering around, seeing where my feet would take me, really just moving in this very intentional way and understanding that whatever is meant for me would arrive, would show up, that I would find it, and that anything that I didn't see was not a missed opportunity. It just wasn't for me at that time. I could always decide to circle back. So just having the expansiveness of the experience and not feeling like, oh my God, there's not enough time.
I think it's really cool. What I heard from you there is a little bit of like going with the flow, maybe saying yes to things you might not have said yes to before. You probably stepped out of your comfort zone a lot. What was it like to step out of your comfort zone? And were there any memorable adventures you had that, really tested your, what is comfortable for you?
Oh yeah, I think I heard a saying that life happens outside of your comfort zone, and it never really resonated until this year in New Zealand, where I kept noticing where the edge of my comfort zone was and then deciding to move past it, to say yes, and then realizing that what I found on the other side was more of me, and it was beautiful and it was so exciting. So yeah, it was a year of yes. And let's see, some of the most memorable experiences included my 3 month stay at Wilderland, which was an organic farm and sustainable living community in the Coromandel Peninsula on the North Island. And first time I've done anything like this, when I first arrived and I met the people there, I thought, oh my gosh, I am not hippie enough to be here. I am not cool enough to be here. This is so far outside of anything that I've ever done because it's off-grid living, it's composting toilets. Like if you've got to pee, you better pop a squat, right? And so we're waking up every morning when the sun is rising, taking care of the chickens, getting food from the garden, cooking together in the communal kitchen, and then working the land or working at the organic shop there for the first part of the day. And then you have the latter part of the day to kind of just do what you want to do. And a lot of that time was spent in community with the other people, talking about, oh, what kind of conflicts are arising? What kind of inner experience are you having? Like, really creating space for the questions that you wish you could talk about with people on a day to day basis. Like, how are you feeling? Tell me honestly. What issues do you have with me? Tell me honestly. Let's resolve this. So, that was an incredible experience for 3 months, and it just helped me slow down. I was away from electricity, like realizing how the natural cycles and rhythms of the earth can really drive your day and your energy in this beautiful, harmonic way was the gift of that experience. And then after I left that, wow, there's just so many other ones, but some of the peak ones include um, going down the Whanganui River on a canoe journey, a 3-day canoe journey. We canoed 54 miles, and I did this with a person that I met randomly on a bus tour a couple weeks earlier. They're from Germany. Their name is Froni, and we went on this canoe journey together. And Froni had some canoe experience. I'd never been in a canoe before in my life, so it was brand new and it was incredible. We meshed so well. We navigated that river, any of the rapids, and I learned that I really can go with the flow. There were all these things I thought about myself. I don't like the cold. I don't like being wet. I don't like, insert whatever your mind tells you that you don't like. And then I realized, oh, I actually really enjoy this. Okay, I'm in a canoe, it's raining and I'm cold and I've been paddling for 3 hours. I actually really love this because I feel so in my body, I feel so in the elements, and wow, look at what I'm doing. I can do hard things. I can do anything I set my mind to. And that's what I walked away from really the whole of my journey in New Zealand with, because other than that, I did a 4-day hike. And that was my first time packing in, packing out, and camping in like 20 years. I'd never done anything like that. I also did a 10-day Vipassana meditation course where you meditate over a hundred, no, you meditate under 100 hours, just under 100 hours for 10 days. So that's from 4 a.m. to 9:30 in the evening. Your day is full of meditation, really getting in tune with myself. And then I think the last thing I'll mention is that when I was in Fiji, because I went to Fiji, which is something that my sister and I talked about when we were little. We saw the Fiji bottles. We said, "Wow, we'd love to get there one day." And I got to Fiji, and I did my first scuba dive, which is another thing I said I would never do. Me and the ocean, I didn't know that we were in love until we had this long year of like flirtation that culminated in this experience of me scuba diving and going down, I think 40 meters to experience bull sharks. So I was sitting there behind this tiny little wall, and there were all these bull sharks feeding on this tuna head swimming right in front of me. And yeah, experiences like that just reminded me what powerful opportunity opens up when you lean in to the fear and the discomfort. And that's how you really learn who you are.
It's interesting that, starting in the pandemic and then throughout your time in New Zealand, it was a lot about nature and the outdoors. And do you think that was a result of the change you were going through, or do you think that was, propelling you along the change? Like it was, the start of the change was just discovering, the natural world and what it was like to be there without like emails and meetings and, cell phone buzzing and social media and all those crazy things that distract us.
Yeah, I think that nature was the catalyst. I think I was ready to meet her, but I think that getting outdoors and connecting with this deep, deep part of who we all really are, where we came from, was the spark of remembrance that drove me forward to continue exploring who I really was in the context of this different kind of world that I had thought I belonged to. I am so, so grateful for the time that I got to spend. Like that year in New Zealand, I was outside probably 80% of my time. And I think that that is the way that my soul craves to live. So I continue to ask myself, like, how can I create that kind of a life now that I'm back in the States too?
Now, I've met lots of people, in myself to an extent as well, have kind of changed our lives in a similar but different way as you have. And then I meet a lot of people who are just happy, a six-figure job, a stable job, um, living that life. And sometimes I think it would just be easier if that job you had made you happy. What is it that you think like drives this change with, there's some segment of the population that just isn't happy with, a conventional life? Or maybe, maybe there's a whole bunch of the world are not happy with a conventional life, but only some make the change. Why do you think you just couldn't be happy working, working in insurance, making a good living and, having what would probably on the outside look like a perfect life?
I really just don't think that's why I'm here. I don't think that the structure suits my spirit. I think that I thought I wanted the container, but I didn't realize that the container was a cage. And there are people that like that structure, that need that predictability. And when you really get down to it, I'm actually the type of person who doesn't want to know what my future looks like, who likes waking up every day and being like, wow, blank slate, new opportunity. I wonder what kind of magic is going to fill the canvas of this masterpiece that I'm living in. And I think, yeah, it's know thyself. And when you know yourself, when you really ask those tough questions, is this life working for me? And you keep digging into it, that's what I did. And the answer for me was no. There's nothing wrong about the alternative. It's just not for me.
It's often tough for people to come back to real life after a big journey or, a sabbatical, like, a year off like you had. What was it like for you coming back to America? Did you resume your regular job? Did you do something different?
Everybody warned me it would be hard. So I was mentally preparing myself for that even before I left. But I had no idea how challenging it would really be. I think that the saving grace is that instead of coming back to Dallas, which is where I am now, I went to Austin and lived with my sister and brother in law for a year. And I got to say that Austin is 100% aligned with my soul. And it was a great place for me to come back to reality. So I settled in and I started thinking, what do I want to do now? And I actually did have the opportunity to go back to my old job. And I was having conversations with them and really thinking, oh, well, I got to make money. I got to be stable. But there was again that part of me that was like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. This feels too safe. You just spent the last year proving that you could trust yourself and that you could flow. And now you're going to go running back to this structure and stability without even trying to see what else is out there. And that voice won. So I did decline to go back to my old job. And then I started feeling into what do I really want? Like, what do I know about? And during this time, I realized that my life in Austin was feeling so stressful. And I started digging into why that was. Why is it so hard for me to be back here? And I realized that when I was in New Zealand, I was living from a place of joy. I was nourishing my soul on the daily without even having to think about it. It was easy, right? And then when I came back to the States, the challenge was to live in that same way with intention in the old structures of the life I once lived. So now I decided I had to get very, very intentional about my practice of joy. I had to create space for the things that nourished my soul. And in doing that, I just started doing that. I sat down with my calendar and I said, okay, this day I'm getting out in nature. This day I'm doing this, which, okay, like is the planner in me. There's still a bit of type A in there. And that's what I needed to get into a rhythm of consistently thinking about what I wanted to do and prioritizing what I wanted to do. And instead of being like, what should I do? So I started leaning into my joy, and that released the tension of being back in the States. I was like, okay, I can find this experience of freedom wherever I am because I carry it with me. It's just a matter of cultivating it and getting into the practice of it now that I'm back in my quote unquote old life.
And you're now a coach helping people live a more joyful life. Can you talk a little bit about, what that's like? What does that job entail?
Yeah, so that's the latter part of the journey. As I started leaning into my own joy, I started understanding that joy is something we all have access to. But the stories around joy are that it's a luxury. We got to work our whole lives to earn or deserve it, or it's this frivolous thing, or there's so many people suffering. I don't deserve to focus on my joy. And so I started to really understand that there's this powerful divine energy inside of us that we can activate, that we have access to at all times, and that we access it through the intentional nourishment of our souls, through doing things that make us feel good. As you do more of what makes you feel good, you learn more about who you are. You're listening, you're receiving, you're understanding what ignites that light inside of you. And as you learn that about yourself, you realize that you have a lot more control, a lot more agency, a lot more power in your life than you maybe thought you did. You thought, oh, I have no time for these things. Well, you make time for those things, then you realize that time is what you make of it. So as I'm exploring and understanding this in my own life and seeing the shifts, seeing the way that I'm not struggling to set boundaries anymore, seeing the way that I'm feeling confident, putting myself at the center of my world unapologetically, and seeing how it is really making me come to life, I thought, wow, this is something that a lot of people are missing out on. And it's something that I really feel in my soul. I am here to talk about. And as I was thinking about that, I had this idea for a group coaching program, a 6-week container. And as I was thinking about that container, I happened to come across a business/spiritual coach in Austin. We met very synchronistically and we started working together, and he challenged me to create that program. And honestly, like, it must have just wanted to be birthed, because once he challenged me, within the time span of like 2 weeks, it was done. So I wrote it on paper, I designed it, I had the formats for it, the worksheets, and then he said, okay, go out there and talk to people about it, and tell them that this is something you're offering. And as I did that, I got 7 women in that first group. I call it, my course is called The Joyful Way. So I got 7 women in that program, and we moved through the 6-week program, which is designed to really help you first notice where the joy is in your life. And then notice what stories or patterns or rules might be holding you back from your joy, helping you bust through those limiting beliefs and barriers, and then digging deep into what actually activates that joy in you. What do you love? What are your dreams? And then from there, just creating an intentional practice, helping you create space, make the time, and understand the importance of doing this, so that by the end of it, you really are a different person, simply because you've been honoring your soul by doing what makes you feel good. And so that was the journey that has taken me to this point. And since that first program, I led another group of 7 women. 7 seems to be my number, through that program, and it turned into a 7-week program because I decided that we needed an additional week to really dig into the limiting beliefs, the roles, and the rules that you're playing that are keeping you from really expanding into the truth of all that you are. And so it's been incredible. It's been truly like a gift from my soul to share this gift with other people. And I keep expanding. I'm very much still flowing. I don't know that this is the end all be all, because I'm already having these ideas about ways that I can expand. And one of those ways is that I also created a joy booth. So it's a traveling booth that I can set up in parks, in businesses, and establishments, because I work with women and I wanted to expand and be able to serve joy up to everyone. So through this booth, people can walk up to the booth, they order something from the menu. We have things like dopamine hugs, the roar of release, there's a bubble bath, all things that are designed to get you really dropping in with another human, connecting, authentically relating, expressing, and focusing and anchoring on joy, and how joy isn't just about feeling good. It's really about honoring your authentic experience. And that includes all of the emotions, right? So we talk about all of that at the Joy booth. And that has been what's really lighting me up. And that is a vision that I want to expand on. I'm just not sure how it's going to expand yet, but I'm here for the ride.
That sounds incredible. I was wondering, with your joy courses, are there any themes that you've noticed of things that are, bringing, most people joy, or holding most people back, that, kind of surprised you, or maybe surprised the people that were in the groups?
Hmm. I think it hasn't been too much of a surprise for me, because my soul just sees the way that the world is right now. But a lot of what is holding people back is the rules that you're living by, the rules that you've made about who you have to be and how you have to live. And the fact that we, for some reason, think that we have to explain the shifts in our identity and our choices to the people around us, that those shifts have to be permissible, acceptable, and understood by the people in our circles, in our spheres, in our environments. And that if they don't understand those shifts, we can't make the changes ourselves, right? So really, it's it's about noticing what rules and limitations you're placing on who you think you're supposed to be, and tearing those apart, and really asking, well, who do I want to be? Who do I know myself to be, regardless of what the outside world is reflecting back to me? So that is a main thing that I have witnessed in these women. And in this container, we're giving them the permission to break those rules, rewrite them into more expansive ones, and really just get out there and be who they are, unapologetically and deeply and truly. And then as for things that bring people joy, Well, it's a lot of nature stuff. Yeah, every person is like getting out in nature. That's something that brings them joy. Sometimes it's something as simple as coloring books, adult coloring books. Sometimes it's getting into a cold body of water and feeling the way that that water electrifies your entire body, right? So there's a theme of nature. There's a theme of those quiet moments spent in the morning sipping tea, journaling, meditating. And I think that this is because one of the things that I believe is that the practice of joy is really a practice of presence and reflection. So if you are here now, if you are really with the experience as you are living it, you can deeply embody and activate that joy inside of you. And even the tiniest of moments, that sip of tea, bringing all of this incredible outpouring of joy from within you. And so, yeah. And then if you're also thinking back on, wow, how was today? What ignited that spark inside of me? What felt right? What did I want to do that I didn't get to do? If you're reflecting, then you can make shifts, intentional shifts with the next day that align you even more intentionally and divinely with the call of your soul, the voice of your soul. That's what I think joy really is. It's the expression of your soul.
When you were talking about what holds people back, it made me think to one of the most important books I read in my life. It was called How Will You Measure Your Life? And it was by Professor Clay Christensen. And he's this, famous management consultant, but it was all about like, what's important to you? And I think, I read that, I was like, holy crow, I'm pursuing a life that is from similarly from the outside, really great, but wasn't meaningful for me personally. And yeah, I wish I'd had someone like you to guide me through it, because this was 15 years ago, and working through some of the exercises to understand, hey, I'm actually on a path that's not meaningful for me. And I think what you're helping people is discover what path is meaningful for you, and then find a way to pursue it, which I think just brings so much more happiness when you're doing something that you want, as opposed to something you feel you're supposed to do. And in my case, at least, I didn't even know that I was, doing something that I kind of thought I should do. It's just, this is what we're supposed to do. You have a good job and you're happy and you're good at your job. And like, I never even really thought deeper than that. And I think a lot of people, we get into that same place where it's like, this is what everyone does. You have a job, you pay your mortgage, you take your kids to school. And yeah, just stepping back and taking that break is just so valuable.
Yeah, exactly. We get so hung up and caught up in the cycles of what we're doing that we don't step out of them and ask, what could we be doing differently? And I think it's also because it's hard. You're going against the grain. You have this structure, this mold that it's easy, right? From certain perspectives, it's easy to fit in that mold. It's easier than breaking out of it and going your own path where there's no map and you have no idea what's going to arise from that experience. It's certainly not an easy path, but the more you lean into it, and the more tiny steps you take, this is why just doing what you love is a tiny step in the direction of creating a life you crave. So doing those things can make it a little less scary. Finding people also who can inspire you, who you can take these bold leaps of faith with together, that is also a way to support yourself. But it's certainly not the path of least resistance, but it is the path of, in my opinion, most fulfillment.
Wow. And I think that's a great way to end this episode. This was just so deep and so interesting. Thanks for coming on the show today, Xan.
Thank you so much, Richard. I got so lost in the energy of that conversation. It was so fun.
It was super inspirational. And if people want to learn more about, what you're doing, or just follow along on your journey, how can they find you?
Yeah, so a website is in the works. I believe that done is better than perfect. So right now I'm doing all of my communications through Instagram, and you can find me there at Xan am, and that's Xan Xan am.
Wicked. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And with that, thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.